Hello and welcome back. I was at the library again, you know, going down a little rabbit hole reading old newspapers, and I found something a little concerning. It was advertisements for medicine for women. The whole medical history for those guys is genuinely concerning. So we're going to break this down into 5 sections to make it easier to understand what really happened with women. So starting off with section 1, these are medications that should have had a warning label the size of a billboard. We're starting off with the classics, I guess. First up is thalidomide. This was given to pregnant women for morning sickness, which is like, it's fine. People take pills to feel better sometimes. The only downside of this morning sickness pill that was meant for pregnant women, it actually caused babies to have birth defects, missing limbs, severely shrunken limbs, really bad. And it happened to 10,000 babies. 10,000. Normally you'd expect a side effect for some pills like maybe mild drowsiness, maybe some lightheadedness. Modern day uses of this medication are for cancer and leprosy, but needless to say, pregnant women should not have been taking this. Up next, we have another pill for pregnant women called diethylbistrol, or DES. It was originally meant to prevent miscarriages. Plot twist, it did not prevent miscarriages. It actually increased the rate of miscarriages, and for the children who survive, at least the young babies that were girls, had an extremely high chance to get clear cell adenocarcinoma, which is a type of cervix cancer. Essentially, the medication did not help you, and it gave your kids problems, which is a theme that I'm starting to notice here. Alright, next up we have fenfluramine, part of a weight loss drug that was very popular, because nothing says health like rapid weight loss and unexpected heart damage. The side effects included heart valve damage and pulmonary hypertension, which is not a very good side effect. It's not like dry mouth, that's like your lungs are now trying to kill you. This next medication is a lot more dark and has a darker story. It's called haloperidol. It was a very powerful antipsychotic, which is great, if you actually have psychosis. But historically, it wasn't always used for that. It was more like, oh, my wife's upset. My wife has opinions. Oh, you cried today, honey? Boom. Sedated. Not only that, but another side effect was tardive dyskinesia, which can permanently cause involuntary movements. So not only are you not being listened to, your face might start doing its own thing forever, just bouncing around. Yeah, cool. Yeah, right, cool. Finally, we have Depo-Provera, which was a birth control shot. Was it effective? Yes. Controversial? Also yes. Why was it so controversial? Because early trials were done on marginalized women who didn't always fully give consent, which is less of a clinical trial and more of a criminal trial. Now with all of those out of the way, we can move on to section 2, which really only has one treatment for one diagnosis. So we're just going to call section 2 freaky, because that's the only way I can describe it. The diagnosis is hysteria, which was the medical term for, having emotions, being stressed, or, just existing as a woman. The treatment for that was, pelvic massages that were administered by doctors professionally until the patient had a quote-unquote hysterical paroxysm, which is a very fancy way of saying they made them bust a nut. They gave them orgasms. Science shook hands with the ladies after they were done and said, that's science, go home, have fun now. I think we can really put the blame on the husbands of the time for this one. Maybe if you made your wife a little happier in bed, you would have a happier marriage, and you wouldn't have to deal with those kind of problems. For section 3, this is the lie down and don't think about it era. This is when we had things like neurasthenia, which includes being tired, thinking too much, and, the worst one yet, reading. Oh, the horror. So along comes this rest cure created by this guy named Silas Ware Mitchell, and the treatment plan for it was just stay in bed for weeks. Don't read, don't write, don't think, don't exist intellectually. It's basically, not having a brain. With all that sitting around, that would make a woman really restless, and might make them, stressed, or maybe even give them emotions. So you might have to send her in for another pelvic massage, make sure she gets that hysterical paroxysm. Moving on to section 4, these are when things get extremely dark. This is when medicine just loses the plot entirely. Doctors thought women's reproductive organs were the things that were causing them mental illness. So naturally, the only solution that any doctor could come up with was an oophorectomy or a hysterectomy, which is removing your ovaries and uterus respectively. Because, if you're sad, clearly the problem is your organs. Not your life or society or any other factor. It's your organs, so, gotta go, gone. Now, if carving your pussy out wasn't bad enough, there's bloodletting, because doctors believed illness was caused by bad blood. So they were just like, yeah, remove some. Nothing heals weakness like more weakness. And this wasn't like in 1800s, 1700s. This was in the 1900s. Granted, it was really early 1900s, but, still, it's pretty bad. Then we have the famous Isaac Baker Brown, who famously performed the clitorectomy to cure, the hysteria, epilepsy, and quote-unquote excessive sexuality. It's not a medicine, it's just violence in a lab coat. It's really messed up. Obviously, clitorectomy means cutting off your clitoris. That means no more hysterical paroxysms. I think it's really just solving the problem at its core. Section 5 is really just government-sanctioned horror. It's just the eugenics movement, where women labeled as poor, disabled, undesirable, anything like that were subject to forced sterilization. No consent was needed. It was literally upheld in court in a case called Buck v. Bell. Look it up. It wasn't fringe. This was actual government policy. Thank you for watching. That's all for today, so make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. See you later.